I've been wanting to talk about feminism for a while, and just a few weeks ago, Ben Shapiro gave a speech and it actually was answering a question. And his answer, I felt, gave me a good opportunity to talk about feminism and some of the issues that I feel have arisen about questions about whether feminism has been good or not for society. So, this was a speech that was given to what looks like a primarily conservative audience, and a question was asked by a young woman about what we should do to both honor the accusations of those who are sexually assaulted, or who claim to be sexually assaulted, and also to respect those who have been accused and make sure we're not violating their rights. Ben Shapiro gives an answer which quickly said we should believe both the accused and the accusers and try to figure out what's at the bottom of it. But then he launches into essentially a forceful accusation that feminism has been essentially the cause behind a lot of the sexual assault that we see in the first place. So here goes, some of Ben Shapiro's responses and then my responses to what he says.
The left destroyed traditional mores with regard to relations between the sexes, destroyed them wholesale. So the original idea was that men were supposed to act with honor and chivalry in protecting women, and women were supposed to look for example, relationships just as men were. But reinculcation of traditional roles of male and female with the same feminist respect that we ought to have for women at all steps of the process is the answer.
So Ben Shapiro feels like reinculcation of traditional roles for men and women is the way forward. It's the way out of this trouble that teaching people whatever they want is the way forward has gotten us into. He says essentially teaching people to do whatever they want has led people to have sex whenever they want, and that leads people to assault each other. I am deeply uncomfortable with this idea. Now, I'm not opposed, and I don't think almost anyone on the left is opposed to the idea that there are some essential characteristics that people who are men and people who are women tend to have. For example, if a lot of men choose to be truck drivers because as boys they like playing with machines or with trucks, and a lot of women choose to be nurses because they like caring for people, then great. But my trouble comes, and my question comes, when we start teaching little boys and teaching little girls, teaching little boys that they like truck driving better than caring for people. And little girls, they don't like trucks, they don't like machines, they should like caring for people. I'm fine with people self-sorting. I'm fine with people liking different things, in part because of their gender, in part because of other life experiences. What I worry about is teaching people what they like. Are we going to teach people, are we going to teach men that they like having multiple sexual partners and teach women that they only like having one sexual partner? Are we going to teach men that they need to control their desires and teach women that they need to control their men? Are we going to teach men that they need to protect women and teach women that they need to be protected and they can't protect themselves? I mean, shouldn't we be teaching them to both honor and respect each other, to honor and respect their partners, to be faithful, to be kind, to be gentle, and then let people fill into roles that they themselves fit best? That's what I'm concerned about with teaching roles. Some men love working. Some men love raising children. Probably more women love raising children than men. But if we teach men that they don't like raising children and teach women they do, what are we doing? Are we allowing... The point of liberal government, the point of liberal society is to allow people choice, allow people to fulfill their own desires and needs. And if we're teaching about traditional roles, we're not doing that.
The feminist movement was not wrong when they said men are acting like pigs. They were wrong when they said women also ought to act like pigs and that this is a solution to our problem. Because now what's happened is they got rid of all the traditional mores about how sex ought to be connected with love and ought to be connected with relationships. They got rid of all of that. It was just a bodily function now. Except when it comes to actual sexual assault, we treat that differently than any other bodily function, obviously. But that's the problem, right? So they create this standard where sex is basically a throwaway item, sort of like eating. And then we treat sex very differently when it comes to what we all know it is, which is a deeply important and intimate part of a person's life, and then we attempt to backdoor standards of consent that, frankly, don't make any sense in a real-life context.
So I'm not going to judge what Ben Shapiro means here, but I'm going to question several of the things he says in this section. Feminism doesn't say that women should behave like pigs, and should behave just like men. And feminism and the left in general doesn't say that sex is nothing more than eating. It's just another bodily function. I mean, that's clearly untrue from the very fact that he states, which is the left has extremely high and probably somewhat strange ideas about consent, which shows that the left actually thinks of sex as something more than just eating. And I think it's somewhat disingenuous of Shapiro to claim that the left thinks nothing about sex, thinks it's nothing more than a bodily function, except when it comes to consent. I mean, the point is, consent is required because sex means more than eating or any other bodily function like that. And so, let's be clear. Feminism wants to require more of men, not less of women. It wants to require men to not assault women, to not be entitled to have as much sex as they like, either with a committed partner or with anyone else. It wants to give women more pleasure in sex, to give women the right to stand up and say, I want to have just as much pleasure as my partner when they have sex. It wants to demand more of men and demand more of women. And the left and feminists do not, in any way, believe that sex is just another bodily function. They see it differently than conservatives do, than the right does, and we'll talk about that in this upcoming section.
Sexual activity was supposed to be confined, this was at least the ideal, was supposed to be confined to committed relationships, particularly marriage. Not everybody lived up to that, but a huge number of people did. In fact, once people got pregnant, people basically got married. This is where women really gave up on marriage a lot too soon. Okay, marriage was the best thing ever for women. It is an amazing thing for men too, because it civilizes them, it cultures them, it teaches them to be protectors of their family and to take care of people and to think beyond themselves and to think beyond their generation. Women gave up in marriage a way to teach men to do those things. And also, women gave up the idea that a commitment was going to come along with this intimacy. And let's be real about this. I mean, every scientific study ever done has shown that women actually do have better sex in the context of committed relationships. All of the crap that you see in Cosmo magazine about sleeping with 100 guys and being sexually happy is just garbage. It is just sheer unadulterated garbage.
Now, first, let us be clear. No one on the left would take Cosmo magazine as their Bible for what they believe as a progressive. So that's not fair, quite. But Shapiro has honed in on a very important difference between the left and the right, between progressives and conservatives, between new morality and old morality. And it is this, that it seems that progressives or the left or non-traditionalists believe that sex should not just be confined to marriage, and traditionalists believe that it should. It goes back to freedom. It goes back to a liberal society. Why was a liberal society established? It was established so that we could live in freedom, as long as that freedom did not inhibit or limit the freedom of other people. And now traditionally that has not been thought of to include sex, but in the last 50 or 60 years we've interpreted it that way. At least those on the left have. Those on the right are still not sure if they can go that far. But we certainly treat same-sex relationships that way. That same-sex couples deserve privacy in their relationships. That they deserve not to be taken to court or taken to prison or beat or anything else like that for having same-sex sex, if you will. But, and this is a big but, that's not something that has a great deal to do with sexual assault. You can believe that sex is all right outside of marriage and still oppose sexual assault. Sexual assault is the forcing of yourself upon someone else for sexual satisfaction. Consent is the key. Whether you give your consent by marrying someone or whether you give your consent by not marrying someone, but by sleeping with them outside of marriage. Those are both consent. The key is not assaulting someone. The key is maintaining your freedom and the freedom of someone else, of only doing something when both parties agree. And importantly, one can be a feminist and still wait until marriage to have sex. Feminists don't necessarily wish to have sex before marriage. Feminists don't say everyone should have sex whenever they want. That's entirely disingenuous of Shapiro to suggest that. Feminism merely means the empowerment of women to do with their lives what they wish, to not be taught by men or by women what their role in life is, but rather to be taught skills, to be taught possibilities, and then to choose a life which fits them, a moral life, which respects other people. And whether they choose to have sex before marriage or to wait until after marriage is irrelevant to their feminism, male or female. Feminism merely promotes the idea that every person is equal, man or woman, or non-gender binary. Everyone has equal right to be respected in their choices. So what sex before or after marriage has to do with feminism, I'm not quite sure. And I think that's an important point to keep in mind if we talk about feminism ruining marriage, that feminism has nothing to do with sex before or after marriage. It's merely an equalization of men and women and of the power that they have.